I have a fantastic moment to play for you from Chris Cuomo's podcast with Mehdi Hasan, where the subject of Donald Trump and how he threatens democracy is being discussed. And Chris Cuomo essentially is downplaying the threat that Trump poses and saying that it's hyperbolic to say the things that I say about Trump, the things that Mehdi Hasan says about Trump, and how he is an authoritarian and could end democracy in a second term in the United States. And Chris Cuomo, before I play this, the context is he sort of, since he left CNN, is doing this. We see it a lot. I don't know why it's so common when you leave a big job like that and then sort of announce your enlightenedness. And now I'm this both sidesy sort of enlightened centrist, and I'm splitting the difference between everything type of character. And I think it's great to be moderate. Being in the middle is meaningless because you're in the middle of what? Trump and Biden? Why would you want to be in the middle of absolutely crazy and common sense? I just don't get it. But being moderate's fine. But Chris Cuomo's doing that sort of, enlightened centrist thing we see a lot. And so because of that, he's arguing that Mehdi Hasan is making hyperbolic arguments, saying the things that I say constantly too, and many others. And that is that Trump threatens democracy and is an authoritarian. And the back and forth here is so fascinating, where Mehdi Hasan just shuts down that argument from Chris Cuomo in a perfect way, as you're about to watch. And then after playing it, I'll discuss the important takeaways from this.
So one of the sticks.
By the way, can you please make sure that you are subscribed to this YouTube channel? If you're watching, you like the content, but you're not sure if you're subscribed, all you do is just scroll, boom, click it. That's it. It's free. It's wonderful. Helps the show a lot. All right.
One of the sticks I've been beaten with recently is that I underestimate dangerously the dangerousness of Donald Trump. My suggestion is pretty simple. I'm not going to argue that he doesn't say what he says. I'm going to argue that it doesn't mean what it would if you said it. Because this man is a lie machine and a hyperbole machine. And you have to look at it that way, that the idea that he's a man of great vision and strategy who wants to become an autocrat and is going to put people around him who can help him overthrow America's democracy, I think is a laughably absurd notion. And the more the left insists on it, the more it makes people think who are in the center, right, that small group, that you guys are exaggerating the problem because you don't have better ideas.
So a couple of things. I'll engage in the substance of what you said in a moment, but let me just question your premise that this is a left critique. I know, Chris, I get it where you're coming from. You have this kind of stick, like you're in the center, there's a right and there's a left and you're above the fray. That first of all, that's not true, but where does this left come from?
Okay, he's about to get to the good part and the meat of the argument, and I'll let that play without interrupting, but I just want to jump in on that. Thank you for calling that out, Mehdi, because it's so aggravating that people find it so easy to do that. I'm above the fray, not left, not right, but forward, the Andrew Yang thing. And I'm just splitting the difference and both sides are equally to blame for problems and blah, blah, blah. And it has to be pushed back against because it's just the case that that is just as active of a stand. You're just choosing to stand right in the middle. And you're choosing to split the difference between, as I said earlier, crazy and common sense. Not between the sides generally. That's so vague. What, one general line and two sides? No. What I mean is between the two individuals leading their respective parties, right? And so the person who is at the top of the ladder of the quote unquote left represents the reasonable part of that side. And there's crazy parts of the left, sure. But Biden represents the common sense, pretty moderate version of that side. And he could actually be a little bit more progressive, and then Trump represents the crazy part of his side. There's more rational people on the right, for sure. But Trump represents the crazy part of his side. So that's what we're talking about. Not that there's only rational people on the left, on the entire left. No. Okay. So that's important to say. But you choosing to split the difference between the current state of the two parties when they're not the same at all in how extreme they've gone, is you actively choosing to split the difference between anti-democracy and pro-democracy. That's not admirable. You're taking a stand, but it's the wrong one.
Some of the most eloquent, passionate, and most informed critics of Donald Trump's fascism and assault on democracy are not leftists.
It's true.
Judge Michael Luttig is not a leftist. Liz Cheney, last time I checked, is not a leftist.
True.
George Conway is not a leftist.
True.
All of the former Trump administration officials who have said the man's crazy, he's an authoritarian.
General John
not
Kelly.
Leftists, right? So they're not leftists. I don't accept the premise that this is a leftist critique. Not at all. In fact, there are people on the left who attack people like me and say you're being hyperbolic and agree with the premise of your statement. So it's not a left thing. Let's just put that to one side. In terms of the substance, number one, let me snarkily say this. Chris, did you think Donald Trump would incite an insurrection and refuse to leave office in 2019, in 2020?
No, but I also wouldn't characterize the behavior the way you did.
You don't think he incited an insurrection?
No, I don't think it was an insurrection. I think it was a riot.
Okay, did you? Okay, I don't agree with that for a second, but let's pop that for a moment. Did you in 2019 or 2020 say Donald Trump will refuse to leave office and incite a riot and an attack on the Capitol?
No.
I did. In 2019, I wrote a piece for The Intercept saying Donald Trump is very clear about the fact that he won't accept the election result and he won't leave, and people are ignoring this danger. And if this, you know what's going to happen? Violence and rioting. I wrote this in The Intercept in, I think, May of 2019, about 18 months before the election. People said to me, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a Brit. You don't understand American politics. The Secret Service will walk him out. There's no danger here. This is all hyperbole. So my first point, Chris, is forgive me when I hear people say it's hyperbole. I was right then and they were wrong. So maybe we should have a little bit of humility from the folks who say, calm down. A lot of the calm down folks were completely wrong on January the 6th, 2021. That's my first point. And then in terms of the substance.
Brutal.
I mean, he is saying this stuff.
Right.
I agree with you, Chris. He's a liar. He's an exaggerator. I completely agree. He's not a strategist. I don't think you need to be a strategist to be an autocrat, right? I don't think you need that. I think you have autocratic tendencies and instincts, and then it's an issue of whether those around you and the
They usually have a plan, Mehdi, as we both know.
Well, he's got people around him. Have you read the Heritage Foundation 2025 report? It's a pretty clear plan for authoritarianism. Pretty well laid out over multiple pages. But just go back to Trump. Okay, when I say, so a friend of mine said recently, a friend of mine who doesn't want to vote for Biden because of Gaza. So I can't vote for Biden. I said, well,
Actually, what we'll do, because I didn't realize how much of this I want to play for you, let me play a little bit more after I respond to the points that have been made so far. First of all, Chris Cuomo said that he doesn't agree that January 6th was an insurrection. He thinks it was a riot. Again, he's just vaguely, and this is a bummer because he did a lot of good work on CNN. He's just sort of, doing the weird shift that we see from a lot of people who I guess feel betrayed by the mainstream outlets. I don't know what causes that, but he is just arbitrarily choosing what sounds like the middle between the right saying it was a peaceful protest and the left saying it was an insurrection. I'll say it wasn't an insurrection, but it was a riot. Look at that. I'm right in the middle. Woohoo. Act of revolt or rebellion. Here's the definition of insurrection if I just Google it. Insurrection, an organized and usually violent act of revolt or rebellion against an established government or governing authority of a nation state or other political entity by a group of its citizens or subjects. Also, any act of engaging in such a revolt. How, on this green earth, does January 6th not classify as an organized and usually violent act of revolt or rebellion against an established government? I think we're an established government. The United States pretty established, yeah. And it was a violent act of revolt or rebellion against that entity. So that's just a strange thing for him to say. But I want to start by zooming out and say, what's the outcome that he's hoping to see happen of downplaying the danger of Trump? Because let's say that Trump were to get into office and he wasn't successful fully ending democracy as I think he could. If I'm responding to the statements and the actions of Trump in a fact-based way, and then bringing those to a logical conclusion, saying, if he follows through on these sorts of authoritarian threats, here's what could happen. And then he happens to be unsuccessful in trying to do those things. Was it wrong to sound the alarms because there was a chance that he could be unsuccessful in being an authoritarian? No. But flip it around. Trump blows Chris Cuomo away. And just like how Chris Cuomo didn't think January 6th was going to happen, imagine Trump could successfully implement a more authoritarian government and unravel our democracy. Is Chris Cuomo going to be so happy that he downplayed it? Hopefully not. So it's very strange for that to be a priority of his. And then he brings up Trump not having vision or strategy. It's true. Trump's not the sharpest tool in the shed. I will give that to Chris Cuomo. There have often been really dangerous leaders who aren't necessarily the smartest, who are sort of cartoonish sometimes, but still can do a lot of damage. And just like how we saw Trump get real close in 2020 and 2021 to blocking the peaceful transfer of power, which would have been ending our election process and choosing presidents, a very less than intelligent person who has dangerous intentions, a lot of power, and smart-ish people around him can do some horrible, horrible things. Then him saying that Trump is such a dishonest person, so he's probably being dishonest when he says he wants to be a dictator or calls for the termination of the Constitution or, promises to target media outlets if he gets power again, or says he'd indict his political opponents, etc. Why, again, are you running interference for Trump? Trump's saying the stuff. Why can't you just respond to what he's saying rationally? Why do you have to say, well, wait, everybody, let's give him the benefit of the doubt, because keep in mind, he lies a lot. It doesn't make any sense. Take his words at face value, then advocate for the conclusion that logically comes of that, which is, if we take what Trump's saying, take what he's doing and the plans that are being made around him by his allies at face value, then we should be sounding the alarm. And God forbid there's some percentage chance that even if he did win, he wouldn't fully do every single authoritarian thing that he wants to do. Then I want to remind you that when Chris Cuomo pretends like Trump hasn't really shown an ability to do the things he says. Sure, he says some dangerous stuff, and Chris Cuomo says, I don't deny that. And he shows an ambition to be an authoritarian leader. But he hasn't really done those things. He's showing with his rhetoric, but he hasn't done that with his actions. Wrong. He tried to block the peaceful transfer of power. And he was able to, or those around him were able to, effectively enough, put together schemes that were so dangerous and outside of the law that Trump has now been indicted twice for his participation in those schemes, because they really could have ended our democratic process, like the fake elector scheme. A semi-complicated scheme oriented at preventing Biden from taking over as the rightful president after an election that he won. So Trump can make his ambitions turn into actions even with his less than high intelligence, putting it nicely. And then I do want to emphasize, as Mehdi Hasan did, that this is not a left critique. You got lots of conservatives, former Trump officials, his former Secretary of State, his former Chief of Staff saying Trump threatens democracy. And then you have the statement about there's just not a plan, though. He doesn't really have a good plan strategy. I sort of addressed that already, but was just jotting down as they were going. So to circle back to it, there is a plan. Mehdi Hasan pointed out Project 2025, and the allies around Trump and Trump himself do have a plan that is frightening. Here's more.
Well, what happens when Trump's president? And they said, well, we'll protest Trump just like we protested him the first time.
But how do you vote for Trump if you don't like Biden's position on
No, they didn't say they would vote for him. They said, well, we'll vote for Biden, but they don't care if Trump wins. They're so mad at Biden.
I got you.
They don't care if Trump wins. And I said, well, what are you going to do once Trump's president? You're Muslim, you're going to suffer. We'll protest. We protested the first time. I said, what happens when he puts the military on the streets and they open fire on protesters? Oh, Mehdi, you're being exaggerating. That's too far. Mark Esper, Chris, a man you know better than I do,
Yeah.
just went on MSNBC last week and said, he told me to shoot protesters. I said, we can't do it. Mark Esper won't be there next time. Next time it'll be Kash Patel or General Michael Flynn. He'll say, sure, boss, whatever you want. So when you tell...
So great job there from Mehdi Hasan. What the interesting thing is, Chris Cuomo's not even saying that we're portraying what Trump has said and done in a hyperbolized way. He's saying our conclusion based on an accurate assessment of what Trump has said and done is hyperbolic. So what he's saying, and he said this out and out, why would he say this, is yes, correct, Trump said those things, did those things, and if we believe him, then we would have your conclusion. But we shouldn't. So let's just assume he's goofing us, he's making a joke, and even though he tried to end democracy last time, he's not actually going to do it this time. And then we'll see how it goes. Why would that be the approach? It doesn't seem as accurate, and it also doesn't seem cautious. And Mehdi Hasan did a great job of breaking down why that was there, so credit to him. But a sad state of affairs for Chris Cuomo on this issue. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel.